deep into the past. It does tell us about pre-written history, and there's a lot of interesting things have been uncovered. And what you're tracking are things called genetic markers. And these markers are mutations that you can track through the past. Initially, it was done through DNA sequencing. Now they're using what are called gene arrays or microchips. One of them, 23andMe is a commercial company. The other ones that do that. But to me, more interesting is the project that's funded by the National Geographic Society called the Genographic Project. This is conducted by Dr. Spencer Wells. Let me spell this, Genographic Project. You can join this project too if you go to the National Geographic website. You can submit a sample, and they will do actually a more extensive analysis, I think, than 23andMe. But what they're doing is they're collecting, unlike us Americans. I mean, I look in this room here, I can see we're from everywhere on the planet. But if you go to most rural areas in most parts of the world, people are living where their ancestors have lived for generations, and so most people tend to stay put. And so what Dr. Spencer Wells is doing is he's going to all these rural areas throughout the world and collecting DNA samples to try to uncover the past migration history of humans. Like, where's the homeland of humans, and how do we colonize the world? And by combining with fossil data, we're getting more better clues. So how this kind of works is, here we have sort of a patriarch. We want to say male there. Doesn't matter. And then if this individual had a mutation, of course, all of his I'm saying he, but it could be a she, has a mutation. And then at the grandchildren level, another mutation occurs. And so you can sort of track the mutations all the way back. And what these stories tell us is that when you track them all the way back, you track us back to Africa. Okay, so we are an African species. Now, what DNA do you track? Okay, now the Genographic Project is looking at the entire genome, but if you want to go deep into ancestry, you have two options here. The best is either mitochondrial DNA, because you inherit mitochondria strictly from your mother. So this is inherited strictly from the maternal side. Okay? So your mitochondrial DNA is strictly from your mother's side, which came from her mother all the way back, almost unchanged. It's not mixed. And for the male side, it's the Y chromosome, because again, a very small portion of it recombines with the X. So this is inherited strictly from the paternal side, almost intact with the maternal ancestors. Okay? If you're talking about autosomes, well, you can sort of see in the figure here. Here's the mitochondrion. There's the Y there. You can see that, again, we've got males and females now. So notice that all descendants of a couple, you inherit your mother's mitochondria. So I have my mother's mitochondria, not my father's. And then this son, of course, his son has his wife's mitochondria, and it's inherited intact. Now, the Y chromosome is strictly paternal to son, but not to daughter. Of course, she doesn't have Y chromosome, okay? But the autosomes, they get mixed and matched, so they're mosaics. And, when someone says, I'm related to Charlemagne, who was the Holy Roman Emperor of 800 AD, France. Well, half of France was too, so it doesn't mean shit. You know what I mean? Well, my ancestor was Pope whatever. Yeah, you and 1,200 other people. Big deal. But some interesting stories have been uncovered. This is a statue in Mongolia of the great Mongol warrior Genghis Khan, who terrorized Europe and Western Asia in 1000 AD. That's because him and his brothers and cousins were the best horsemen of their day. They apparently could, at full gallop, shoot the bow and arrow with great accuracy by holding on their legs. So as they swept westward, they killed the men they conquered, and you can imagine what they did to the women. Of course, that's part of the spoils of war. So scientists studied, they took samples throughout Asia, Y chromosome samples. 8% of all Asian men have the same Y chromosome as Genghis Khan. They're his male descendants. And there's a group in Pakistan, there's a family there called the Khan family. It's a widespread name, but there's a certain group of Khan people in Pakistan who claim they're his descendants, and when they did the Y chromosome marker, they had it. So their family mythology is apparently true. Okay? I was talking about this earlier. These are the Limba people of South Africa. Okay? And they are Africans, but they are practicing Jews. How does that work? So, well, they had an oral history that men from a distant land sailed on a ship many, many, many years ago and were accepted to the tribe and spread their Y chromosomes. And they claim it was these like Hebrew leaders of the Hebrew tribe, and they were right because they have the Y chromosome of the Kohanim priest caste, which is the highest caste of the Hebrew people. So their mythology was proven by DNA sequencing. Mitochondrial sequencing, when you look at the genetic markers in the mitochondria, which has a mutation rate 10 times faster than nuclear DNA, we can identify mutations that lead to what are known as haplogroups. And these haplogroups are identified by these letters here that have associated with a certain geographic origin. And of course you can see it, that all these haplogroups backtrack to a woman called mitochondrial Eve. Now she's not the biblical Eve, but every human on the planet has a mitochondrion derived from her. Now, she wasn't the only female alive in her day. She's estimated to have lived around somewhere around 200,000 years ago in Africa. She wasn't the only woman alive in her day, but she's the only woman of her generation that have descendants alive today. Either her contemporaries ultimately didn't have children, or her grandchildren have children, or what have you, but only her descendants have survived. And you can see how there's the major splits as people migrated around the world. And using these kinds of data, we've been able to generate these maps showing the migration of humanity. And we've been able to date these migrations based on the fossil record, as well as using what's called a molecular clock. And so it's the best information we have now suggests that around 100,000 years ago, modern humans in Africa were bottlenecked due to some climate strife down to about a population of 10,000 people. Okay? And small bands of people crossed at what's called the Gate of Grief, Bab el Mandeb, I think is the Arabic word for that, and followed the coastline here, and then eventually branched into Asia and Europe. And as they moved again, these folks that made this migration, they weren't going somewhere. They were just climbing. They were leaving. Maybe they were ostracized and had to leave a small group of small families, or they had to just climb the next hill to feed, and maybe they made a mile a generation. But over thousands of years, they colonized most of Asia and Europe. And as populations became isolated, these mutations accumulated that became markers for these different haplogroups here. Now, when I teach DNA sequencing at the Newark Center, this is what I have my students do. I have them clone their own DNA and identify their mitochondrial haplogroup. This is the sequencer that we use at the Newark. This is actually my sequence here. I've done mine. And it turns out that, and I've done my wife's as well, we're not from the same origin. And there were two migrations of modern humans into Europe. Now, when modern humans came into Europe, Europe was already occupied by an extinct human called Neanderthal. Okay, we also know there was another extinct human up here in Siberia called Denisova, we know very little about. So there are different extinct humans that we only know from genetic data. But when the first modern humans left Africa and went through the Levant here, like along through Israel and Syria and all that, and came into Europe, they encountered Neanderthals and bred with them. And these are the haplogroups of these Paleolithic, Stone Age, first modern humans into Europe. I'm not part of that ancestry. My ancestry from my maternal side comes from the second migration that came about 10,000 years ago that brought farming into Europe, what's called the Neolithic farmers that came out of Iran. So my genetic markers say that my maternal ancestry is from Iran, although I don't look Iranian, but I have that. Part of that ancestry is Iranian. All right, that's kind of interesting stuff. Now let's, I think we've got one more slide here. Yep, one more slide. Let me go back to that. To end chapter 13. And that is, sometimes a change in a trait, a change in phenotype, can be due to something that doesn't involve DNA directly. Okay? What's called epigenetics. Epi means to stand on top of. So these are changes in gene expression that does not involve a change in the DNA sequence. So two organisms can have the same DNA sequence but have different phenotypes because of this sort of next layer of genetic control. Okay? And it involves chemical modifications of either DNA or modifications of the histones that cause some genes to be turned on, some genes to be turned off. So some individuals may have exact the same sequences, but because of these chemical modifications, the genes are controlled differently. But what's interesting is those changes can be passed on to offspring. Okay? Imprinting is an example. Your book gives you an example of genomic imprinting, where depending on whether you inherit the allele from mom or dad is turned on or off. So you may inherit the same alleles from your folks, but if you get one allele from mother and the other from father, they're going to be expressed differently because of the way they're chemically modified. So there's another layer of genetic control that makes even genetics more complex. This kind of overlies the genetic code. It's a chemical modification of DNA and the histones that affects how these genes are expressed, how they're turned on and off. So there's another layer of complexity. We could spend the rest of the lecture describing this, but we're going to move onward because we're behind already. I wanted to mention that. This is another hot topic in modern genetics here. Okay. I mean, when I was in your shoes in the previous century, none of this was known in genetics. So this science is just a lot of exciting things happening. I'd say most discoveries are yet to come. So the era of discovery is just beginning in biology. So don't assume that everything's already known. Most things for certain are not known. So maybe you could be part of that discovery. You got the guts. Okay, we're going to move into chapter 14, which is DNA structure replication. Now we're going to start getting into the molecular world, even more so. Pardon me. Copy that. I'll close that slide down. We're good? Okay? Of course, this is postage reader on the canvas.